Do you like conversation on a variety of topics? Feel like no one wants to talk about the things that interest you? Tired of only hearing the same political, sports, or catastrophe talk? Yeah, we feel that way too. Join two high-functioning geeks as they discuss just about anything under the sun. We can't tell you what we'll be talking about each week because we don't know where our brains will take us. It will be an interesting conversation though, so hang on and join us. Here comes the relentless geekery. Sound for you.
Yeah, that's well. Let me do what I did before. Let me get things, and what I need to do is see. I know I'll use my CD box sets of Heart and Zappa in New York. Zappa in New York is like a round thing, as if it was a New York sewer cover. That witty fellow. And that's just the wrong size for my tripod here. So let me use Heart instead as the top one. And then I got, okay, how's this? I'm
Yeah.
Better?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. And it's funny, is my waveform, I still get like none blips down here on the bottom. You know what I mean? And as every time before, I see my health check is passed. I see that I'm live, I'm doing something, but I don't know why it thinks that I'm not worthy of getting spectrogrammed here or audiogrammed or whatever. And yet, as long as it's capturing it and you seem to be able to mix it where it's not so differently leveled that, I either sound like a whisper or a bellow.
Right. Well, let me tell you, I'm still kind of working on the one last week with Ted. I got the main episode up. It's in our feed. Still working on the video because it comes in as 3 separate video feeds, and trying to combine those is like way harder than you would think nowadays. And I was like, I just don't have the time to sit and cut Alan when he talks and then put Ted in when he talks and put me. And I'm like, I don't, that's hours of work. So I'm trying to get it all. So we're all on the screen.
And it's funny, for it being our first interview, I was trying to not, like you and I often interrupt each other or talk about what we're talking about as if it's a conversation.
Right.
But I was even thinking that, if we're going to try to do things where we have specific excerpts, even if it's helpful to let Ted know with an hum or I think that if that grabs focus and that the camera, depending on how Zencastr was capturing that, I was worried about it blipping back and forth, which I find terribly distracting when I'm on any number of other video platforms.
Well, that's the thing with Zencastr, it doesn't. We've got 3 complete feeds of each of us. So if we wanted to move it back and forth, we'd have to cut everything ourselves and splice it together. And that's hundreds of little cuts. And I was like,
That's my guess is that it's not ready for prime time video wise yet. Audio, it still is like easily mixable, if you will. But so we'll have to see, if it turns out that the way to capture video, however we do it, it isn't through Zencastr, but it's through Zoom, and we have to kind of mix between. I don't know what the various different formats are and whether, from our website, people are going to have difficulties because, hey, I only use XYZ format and you put it out in ABC. There was a time when I could have told you every single graphic and audio and video format because you kind of had to survive. And now that it's made it easy, it's another one of those troubleshooting things where like, I haven't had to do that. I'm out of practice.
Right.
You know what I mean? It usually takes care of you.
And I think I would hope Zencastr ups the whole thing a little bit, but I mean, I can't imagine it's easy to build a platform through a web-based interface that handles video back and forth and then mixes it automatically. I mean, really, we're kind of pie in the sky there. Just 10 years ago, we wouldn't have even been able to do that much. So
exactly. But I could see that being a holy grail. I mean, as podcasts have grown, as the lockdown has continued, and there's so much more not to just do it, but to be able to capture it and do a good job in real time. When I first, this takes me back a little bit, way back when they first started to have vector-based graphics, not just pixel transformations, but where things had been reduced to equations, and those equations you could do transformations in much quicker real time. And so you started to see graphics programs that were able to do things others could not, and that they never looked, that you shed pixels, if you will. You got away from the 2D thing to it had a virtual state. And I think that as we've gotten better and better about codecs and modems and all the other things that make for, what they go, videvs or whatever else it is, that someone's going to come up with that same breakthrough that the guy living in the mountains of France went away and did math for 6 months and came back with, I think I know how to do this. And then the whole world said, well, now that we know that it can be done, let's go into refinement mode,
Right. It'll be like, nobody thought you could break a 4-minute mile running until Jesse Owens did it. And then suddenly, like within 6 months, like 5 other people did it. It's
right.
kind of
I think it was Jim Ryan, by the way, wasn't it?
Was it Jim Ryan?
I think so. Anyway, but yes, it was.
You're probably more right than I am.
Your point is made, though, that sometimes, don't, the people who are telling you how it can't be done are often interrupted by the people doing it.
Right, exactly. That's a great quote. I remember who that was from. I've heard that. Yeah. So, but it may be like you've said a couple times, maybe with the sound problem that maybe we just switch over to Zoom. Maybe next week we'll just do a Zoom call with audio. When we were just doing audio, Zencaster worked great, because it was really quick, easy, click a button and we have it almost ready.
Right.
But if we're putting video in the mix and throwing it onto YouTube, the downside is, I was going to say the downside is extracting that audio, but Zoom has even upped that, because when they save the recording, they save an audio version and a video version. So you do get both, but it's in a format that has to be converted, but that's not that big a deal. It's just time consuming.
Yeah.
So nothing's perfect, but I mean, come on, seriously, we are recording weekly a radio show that we send out to people, and we're doing video. I mean,
right.
Really,
and we're 40 miles apart, and we're doing this in real time with like no stutter, no lag. I mean, just that, this is a kind of a terrible thing to say. I hate it when people take a miracle and say, well, it's not the miracle I wanted. You know what I mean? When this is such a terrible, how many people have, like, maybe they've struggled to get pregnant, and then they find out that there's this pregnancy enhancing drug and it gives them, but then the baby has blue eyes or something and they wanted brown. It's like, what are you talking about? This is way beyond gift horse in the mouth type thing. This is like, you couldn't even dream of this thing happening. And now you're starting to persnick about it. That's just such an incredible, like, I don't even know, ungratefulness or self-absorption or something like that. You just gotta say,
I have that discussion with my kids all the time, especially with the whole Cyberpunk 2077 fiasco with video games.
Okay.
Some game will come out and they're like, oh, that game sucks. And I'm playing, I'm like, I think it's pretty great. And they're like, no, it kind of sucks because, well, look at this right here. That, shield could have been much higher resolution. I'm like, seriously? That's what we're basing what sucks on, is the shield could have been higher? That's the type of discussion. So I'm like, whatever. I'm going to go play Space Invaders and Galaga. I'm good.
Well, honestly, isn't that human nature, I guess? You know what I mean? That we're talking about it always through our geek lenses, but there's never been a time when someone isn't pulling off like an Olympic miracle, and yet someone is complaining about, well, they could have had all 5 of the events won instead of only 4 of 5. You know what I mean? And just, people who are come in through the clutch again and again, and then the one time they strike out, I don't know, Bill Buckner is such a famous, sad example of that, right? That he was a fantastic ball player, but he let the one grounder get through. And like, he actually had to like go incognito. You know what I mean? He couldn't just live his life anymore without people catcalling him. And just, I don't know, man.
Yeah. Like they could do better.
Like they could do better. And that unappreciation of, man, you were only 99% a miracle, but we're going to focus on the 1%. There's got to be some, I am all about sense of proportion. That's one of my favorite themes that I harp on, because some people, maybe it's cancel culture. There's all manner of ways in which it evidences itself in the world nowadays. And I've always thought, man, I want to take a bigger perspective and say, in the overall, I'm appreciative of the miracle, not, well, the miracle isn't getting exactly as fast as I want. You know what I mean? It's not.
It's almost always entertainment of some sort. People want to bitch and complain. It's like, that 2-hour Rachmaninoff concert that guy memorized would have been a lot better if the piano would have been brown instead of black. Shut up.
Exactly.
To, I
Exactly.
mean, you
Boy.
just sometimes. And honestly, here's my thing. I honestly think it's because, and there's no way to put this without sounding very elitist and very stuck up, but there's just people lead these sheltered lives. They live in their house. They go to work. They stare at a screen. They don't do anything. They haven't accomplished anything done. And by accomplished, I mean just little things like I've been on the side of a mountain as the sun rose and watched the sun come up on the other, the other mountain, the shadows. And then I walked 12 miles and set up a camp and I survived that way. You do those type of accomplishments and you appreciate these types of things. But when you don't have that, it's kind of like everything in the world kind of sucks. And it's just a mindset or something, but it's like, people go look at what's around you. I mean, even going to the river, we went to the river a couple years ago with the kids and they were just fascinated by the clay and they were playing with the clay. And it's like, right. Isn't that much better than sitting at home watching a YouTube video? And it's a little thing, but you need those experiences in life to really appreciate it. And when you're not getting them, then it gets that mindset. It's that crotchety old man mindset. It's like, kids, get off my lawn.
Exactly. Because what I have is this one plot of earth and it's mine and just the over focus.
Right.
I was in the course of my life, I was in the Society for Creative Anachronism, the people that recreate medieval times, sword fighting and food and stuff like that. And what I noticed was there was a big crossover between that and computer science guys like me. And I was like, well, what an odd thing. I would have thought that people who were already closer to making things with their hands and et cetera would be the natural Venn diagram bigger crossover. But what I discovered, not only in others, but in me, was when you spend your time in unreality, what you just talked about, that people's life experience nowadays is often virtual. Well, if you were a computer science guy, you often spent your time in this code is going to make something happen, but looking at the code, it's one step removed. You know what I mean? It's always you're modeling, you're representing what's going to happen. And when you do that, I don't know, 16 hours a day for your career, you really have the need to I need something besides my hands and my eyes. I need the full sensory experience of being outdoors. I need to feel sweat and tension on my muscles. I need to feel love. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Your body, your mind is well aware of what you're missing to have your full human experience. And it kind of steers you towards, in between commuting, why don't you go for a bike ride? Why don't you go and swing a sword and that kind of stuff? So I don't know that I've kept up with my Scott experiences, but I definitely, why do Colleen and I love going hiking and stuff like that? Because she does some virtual things as well. She's a finance person. She works on retirement plans for big corporations and making sure that all the people are moving towards retirement. Well, that's a similar situation. It's all monies in accounts, but it's not necessarily real. It's all long time horizons. And so it's not like instant gratification. And some part of, I'm a cog in the machine and I'm going to make this happen. It's different than, hey, I'm on top of this mountain and I earned it with every step. I did not helicopter in. You know what I mean? I made this good thing happen. And that feeling of participation and accomplishment is so important when the reality doesn't have a lot of that for you if you work in a very virtual environment,
And I can see the comments coming of, who cares? I had my Oculus on. I was on the side of a mountain yesterday skiing. I was bored after 10 seconds, so I stopped. Not the same thing. Not in any way, though I wouldn't mind having an Oculus, but
I'll tell you what, this is I just joined a group on Facebook called Vroom that's about virtual reality for Mensons, so it's about, and I have experimented with that. And what I've discovered is virtual reality doesn't have it anywhere near as much to me as augmented reality.
Yeah.
By that meaning, there's still, because maybe I'm a bad candidate for virtual reality, I process things very quickly and I immediately know when there's stutter and lag. I immediately notice when things aren't quite, and again, not in a complaining way, but if you're looking for immersive virtual reality, you can't have it that you can turn your head faster than it can replot it for you. Whereas augmented reality, you're still getting the world and you're just getting all the cool additions of, and what have we learned? Pokemon Go is all about now the world is inhabited by little creatures that you couldn't see before without your special. And I love, this is a lot of people are really spooked by the idea of Google Glasses or things that give you all the time, real-time information on everywhere you go, people, places, things. But how cool is that to be out hiking? How many times have I said, I wonder what that mountain is over there? And you just hold focus for a second. It goes, well, that's Mount Musalauki, and it's 5,400 feet, and it was first climbed by Edmund Hillary. Or there's something very cool about having information at my fingertips, and not in a intrusive, distractive way, but in a, if I say, hey, well, I wonder what that is, kind of like saying, hey Siri, or just like by giving it focus, it just starts to. And I guess the way people get paranoid is if I focus too much on a person, oh, now I know their finances. Now I know their sexual proclivities.
Right,
and I don't know that I'd have to be able to turn on and off what I would consider to be kind of like rude or intrusive as opposed to helpful. And so I'm looking forward to getting more of those things. And right now, I'm not actively part of it. I don't walk around with Apple or Google glasses on, and maybe because there was such a backlash, I don't know that I want to be one of the people that's taking all the flack for, hey, you're recording me, get away from me with that kind of thing. In some ways, it's going to have to be when they come in a regular pair of glasses and people don't know. You know what I mean? And I'm not using it to be a spy and get over on them, but I really would love to have, I'm in a store and I look at, hey, this is a cool box set. I've wanted to have this Osric Tentacles box set for a while, and it does a quick check and say, well, you could buy it here and support local, or for $5 less, you can, go via Amazon, and it gives you choices that otherwise you just have to say wonder and walk away. And I like all that. I like that.
There's a lot of applications that's going to open up. I got two things with that, what you just said. So one, for virtual reality, there is a game on PlayStation, Oculus, I don't remember which, but it's Star Trek Bridge Crew. And you actually play with like 4 or 5 people, all with glasses on, and you are the members of the Star Trek Bridge crew, and you have to go through adventures. Now, that is worth, I almost bought a PlayStation just to play that stupid game.
Yeah. And if anything, if doing it with other people is a key factor there, that it's not just you and the machine. It's that you're having to deal with, okay, everybody has emotions, everybody has information. Let's get through this together. That would be a very cool bonding experience.
Yeah, I totally agree. And honestly, if I had enough money, I'd buy the PlayStations and the glasses, and I'd bring it to an RG and have a session, a room. It's like, hey, you want to come in? Everybody can take turns, and because I guarantee it'd be a line. People would be coming in all day.
See, that's the thing. It wouldn't be taking turns. There'd be people there that were like, okay, I'm going to wear my astronaut pants and not go to the bathroom for 48 hours because I can't come out of this game.
Everybody'd have ears on and jackets and the shirts. I know, it would be crazy. And then it'd be argued, well, you can't be in here because that's a Farscape outfit, not a Star Trek. And I outrank, that it would be
TV show purity.
It would be
exactly.
Drama in the hallways. And also something Gina and I have done that you mentioned Pokemon Go. Have you and Colleen ever looked at Pokemon Go or the Harry Potter Wizards United to play that while you're out on your walks and things?
We have not. And I guess it's a little bit of like, while I'm out on the walk, I'm appreciating nature, and I don't know that I want to be, well, that sure is a nice ice formation on the frozen river, but oh, here's a little dragon that I have to capture. I kind of, it would seem to cheapen the experience. But having said that, I should do both, right? In other words, when I'm out in nature, I want to be able to see the beautiful trees. But if all I'm going to do is wander around downtown Cleveland and find cool stuff, then you just do one of each. You know what I mean? Do each in its turn.
We've actually done it with the Harry Potter as like a date night. We'll go out to get something to eat, but eat in the car, and we'll drive around until we find a tower and we do a battle, and then we'll find a cool looking place and get out and walk around with the thing. So we kind of do both, because it's not like, oh my gosh, you have to run over here and do this. Now you have to go do this mission over here. It's very when you get somewhere, and
that's
something
very cool.
Most of the time things are there for a while. So it's not like, oh my gosh, we got to rush over here, but we'll forget about this street performer,
Yeah. I really am fascinated with the people like that. That's a different, interesting level of creativity. Someone setting up all those games, all those scenarios where they're looking at a place and saying, this is similar enough that if I just overlay some combat, some monsters, some treasure to be found and stuff like that. That's there. I think I mentioned one of my favorite books I had so low expectations of and then could not stop reading was a book called Damon by it's kind of funny. I love this author and I can never remember. It'll come to me. It's where he talks about augmented reality in a very cool way of you're able to like summon resources, and depending on your status in your augmented reality society, you can gain an edge on the rest of the world, if you will. Well, of course, the bad guys are aware of that as well, and there's even a augmented reality avatar who is an artificial intelligence that you have to worry about. He can interfere with your enjoyment of the world to death and things like that. And Daniel Silva, it might be.
That
Daniel,
sounds familiar.
Okay, exactly. But he hit that in Reality 2.0 were both really, really good takes, and just a little bit like Crichton, a little bit like certain authors who, instead of being spacefaring, far away science fiction, it's like, okay, this is the world plus. It's a kind of like what we're seeing here, but it's the reasonable extrapolation of what's going to happen when we have nanites in our bodies and we're immortal. What's going to happen when we have augmented reality? And you know what I mean? I love that it's a little bit disconcerting of like, okay, this is all too real, and it's just that little bit of it could go either way. Which world do we choose? How are we going to have it be that it's all going to be happy and everybody gets more resources, or it's going to be espionage and a fight for resources?
Right.
Anyway, really, really well done.
I'll have to look that one up. I think you've mentioned it. It's probably on my list to get, but it's like, here's the books I have time to read, and then here's everything else,
Yes.
So speaking of books, you mentioned that you've been reading some comedy books, and we talked about comedy in general, movies, books, music. So what's on your list there?
Boy, so the latest thing was I remember Jack Handy from the Saturday Night Live days. He used to have Deep Thoughts by Jack Handy, really pithy. Well, he's continued to produce not only those books, but works of original fiction, kind of like Dave Barry, segueing from being only a columnist to having also some books. And his Jack Handy's latest one is called The Stench of Honolulu. and it's so like it's funny. It's perfectly pithy funny. You don't have to do a lot of slogging. It's continually just the wonderful, absurd, and great turns of phrase, great commands of the English language and stuff like that. And just, I love books where you're sitting there alone in the room and you're laughing. You know what I mean? That he's able to communicate the laughter, the humor to you so well that it's not only a matter of seeing another human face laughing and then you kind of automatically laugh to be in sympathy. First time I read like Woody Allen, Without Feathers or Getting Even, and was cracking up, laughing my ass off all by myself. There's just such power in someone that can do that. And Mad Magazine has always had that. You know what I mean? And where it's so good, you can't wait to share it with a friend, because when they get to that part and they start laughing, it's like, oh, you just hit the good, Don Martin one where there's something very cool about that ability to encapsulate. One of the reasons I've always loved comic strips is because the grueling labor of doing 3 panels a day, every day for years and years, and being able to be funny consistently, that's an amazing talent, actually. You know what I mean? To develop characters and turn a phrase and have funny, absurd situations and the pacing of it. And so, so besides Stench of Honolulu, it was, I have been reading collections of things, and it's kind of funny. I've kind of lost track of, I really like certain comic strips, but we stopped getting a regular daily newspaper. And then when that kind of fades from your consciousness, you're not aware of, they still keep putting them out. And so there are the latest Foxtrot collections, and there's the latest Doonesbury and whatever else it might be.
And there's Go Comics.
And I just, of all the things that I've been tempted to subscribe to, I'm still not a member of Comixology because I tend to get things from the library and whatever else it might be. But I really was missing, out of all the newspaper, I was missing the comic strips more than anything else. I found substitutes via Reddit and Facebook and stuff like that for getting my daily news, biased and unbiased. But anyway, and it's very cool that there's lots of stuff out there. People are still putting out, not only are there web comics that have their own existence, but Go Comics still is the syndicator, if you will.
Right.
And I was, of course, sad like everybody else was when, Calvin and Hobbes went away and Far Side went away and Bloom County went away, some of my favorites. But then Bloom County came back. So
did Farside.
Yeah, exactly. And like, I haven't seen that on a regular basis, but I have a Farside calendar for this year. And like, knowing that Bill Watterson lives right here in the Cleveland area, I have such a fantasy of one day it'll just start up again. And I'll be like crying over, oh my God, we've missed you so much. We've missed your humor. We've missed your point of view. We've missed oh man.
That's funny because, some of my writing, when I write some of the books, 'cause I'm trying to hit that middle grade, and
Yes.
in my mind, I picture Spaceman Spiff and his
Yes.
adventures, and it really helps me get into that flow and the mood of thinking like that, and the adventure and the fun, and that's what. Dear God, his stuff was so amazing because it captured that whole shift between reality and not reality.
Yes.
Calvin's
Kids
real.
have
He's a
incredible
boy.
imagination. Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
But so is Hobbes, just as real, just because the adults can't see him except as a stuffed animal. So is he an interdimensional being? Is he reality to Calvin and nobody else? Or is he actual reality, but we're seeing the overlay? And just those little
Right.
things. That's the adult in me thinking. The kid is just, it's all fun and it's imagination and the Spaceman Spiff worlds and, the things he would do, like, how he got Hobbes. He captured him in a trap with a tuna fish sandwich.
Tuna fish sandwich.
You know?
Irresistible. That's right.
Yeah.
I
So
think that this trip was running for like a week or even two before they showed Calvin interacting with Hobbes from day to day. It was the real tiger. And then they showed like mom had to pop him in the washer or something like that because he got dirty. And he was a plush toy. It's like, oh, that's such a great vehicle. Yeah. That's, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That it wasn't just a kids only in his, I'm trying to think, it was his imagination, but how fully realized to show the static plush toy versus the nice scraggly Hobbes in reality, if you will.
Yeah.
Very well done.
He definitely kept his integrity and kept the humor and the lightheartedness and didn't devolve into political statements, though there's some of those, but in a very kid and lighthearted way.
Exactly.
I thought,
more social than political. You know what I mean? He talks about, what's it like to be the smartest guy in the world? I just can't stand that I'm having to put up with all these other people. And of course, Hobbes comments on, the zipper goes in front on those pants, right?
Right, exactly. It was so perfectly done, and the fact that Hobbes is named after a famous psychologist is just that subtle little detail.
Well, and just that, Calvin and Hobbes, just that they're both named after like giants of philosophy, if you will, and that their identities, if you will, play out in the comic strip. You know what I mean? Which is reality versus anyway. Yes, I agree.
And just everything about it. I turned my kids onto it, and that my son just bought the whole complete collection. So, it had an impact, and that's comedy. We've talked about it before. Comedy has impact.
Absolutely. This is very funny. I know that I could not have someone in my life that didn't have a sense of humor. And so when Colleen and I were first dating, luckily it was like we kind of got together for real as of October. We knew each other from before, but got together at Halloween. And so then we had Thanksgiving, Christmas, opportunity for gifts. Well, as you might imagine, it was like, I gave her things that I really love. And it was a way of showing who I am, because this is like the funniest things in the world to me. And then finding out that not only did she like them, but she already had a couple in the Life in Hell series by Matt Groening, or a bunch of the Calvin and Hobbes books. And her son Tim was pretty much Calvin growing up, incredibly smart young man, and given to flights of fancy and stuff like that. And so it was, I can't, like, there's almost no what would you call it, confidence that I had in our budding relationship. There's no better things I could have put into the plus column than she really knows what I'm talking about when I say the Life in Hell 7, bosses from hell, or make a reference to Calvin and Hobbes. This is about as revealing as I can get. She has a phenomenal memory, absolutely as good as mine, and mine is really weirdly good. I don't know why I remember as much as I do. And at one point, we were making fun of, attestations of love. And I said, an eyes as dark as, and she completed frying pans, which is a quote from a Flintstones episode from the mid, if not early 60s. So we both would have been 5, 6, 7 years old. You know what I mean? We would have been pups back then. And yet it stayed with you, and we both laughed, and we both melted with, oh my God, she gets it, he gets it. It's just such a weird, you know what I mean? Anybody else would be like, really? That's not the most romantic thing I've ever heard. But I'll tell you, if you're a freak who has this weird memory and you find someone simpatico and that they appreciate it, that they remember the cool, funny blips, not just eidetic memory where you remember everything. They have the ability to summon those iconic, cool things. It was a lightning bolt of coolness.
Nice.
It was just, I was so happy to have found someone
Now,
like that.
why haven't they made a Hallmark nerd romance movie? I mean, come on.
Maybe they have. I didn't watch enough of those, 4:00 afternoon movies to say, hey, geek love or something like that. I know
I don't
there's
think they
comics
have.
about it, that maybe there's some, if not Hallmark movies, they've made other movies where it really was, a young man bound for love, you know what I mean? But he happens to not have the best way with the ladies. And so, I don't know, American Pie has a geek character, Wonderland. I'm trying to think of what things.
There's the Big Bang Theory, which had 4 distinct nerd personalities, and they all basically had their own challenges with romance, but found something at some point in a very comedic way. And even Sheldon and Amy, she learned to deal with his uniqueness the way he was. And, there were a couple times when they'd get upset with him, and he's like, wait a minute, you're mad and upset with me, but this is who I am. This is how I'm expressing myself.
And you knew going in that this is who I was. You know what I mean? Actually, Scott Pilgrim Saves the World is a wonderful, a good geek love story. It really speaks to geek culture, all the video game stuff, all the comic book stuff, that's a really good one for, you have to get a lot of the references to enjoy the movie. But if you do, it's Easter egg heavy. It's so good with all the, and the fact that they got all kinds of good actors, heavyweight people to be in it, playing the various different, I don't know. I've watched that more than once because it was I want to appreciate it again. I remember how much I loved it, and I was laughing so much that sometimes you miss the next line, so you have to watch it more than once.
It's like a video game Monty Python.
Yes.
So
yeah, I love comedy CDs. It's a little weird, that we love live comedy, we love stand-up, and almost always when they have things for sale at their merch table afterwards, I hardly ever buy the DVD because I kind of want the focus on the voice and the intonation and the craft of how they've put it together more than I want to see them. I know that's an odd thing. I guess my sense of humor is, I of course enjoy physical comedy. We just watched the Marx Brothers movies. In fact, I know I'm jumping around, but this is just how my life is. We've been working our way through various different, all the Hitchcocks, all the Woody Allens, all the Wes Andersons, that kind of stuff. And we're kind of running out, we're getting to the end of the Coen Brothers. So what else do I want to see? I've always wanted to see all the Marx Brothers in order. I probably have seen all of them, but not necessarily in order to admire the craft in which they grew over the course of time. And it's very cool to see a movie from 1929 and wow, they were funny as hell. And you want to think, well, it's black and white. It can't be as good as our full-blown color special effects extravaganza. No, they're fantastically funny and fantastically talented. And the way that they do, comedy is time-honored from 100 years of commedia dell'arte or vaudeville or whatever their influences are. And so it's very cool to see how well crafted it is. You know what I mean? So, Woody Allen is, a lot of his early stuff is the most absurdly funny, and then he got serious, and then he got funny again and stuff like that. And occasionally he has a clinker, but it's, I really enjoy, it's kind of whatever he's doing, I want to see it. He's proven himself enough to me as an artist and as a director that I want to see it. And that is one of those guys you kind of have to, sorry, let me turn that, yeah, darn it. There we go. He's got baggage. He's got maybe bad things that he did. And so, he's my prime candidate for, can I separate the artist from his art and really still enjoy, as opposed to, I don't know, I can't get past someone like Bill Cosby. I loved him growing up.
Right.
And yet, I don't know, somehow being like a drugging rapist makes me, it makes my skin crawl so much that I can't give them a break. And I'm not sure about other people other people really do. They jump on Al Franken, they jump on Louis C.K. Maybe I'm talking about comedy people in particular, that they're still very funny, but some people could never get into Andrew Dice Clay because his act was to be the biggest jerk, the biggest misogynist ass that you could imagine. And so I'm I guess that's one of those places in which I give myself, I'm just going to see what it's like and see if I'm embarrassed to be laughing, but I'm still laughing, or whether it is, okay, he's wearing on me now. This is a one note, a one trick pony. And his humor is so offensive that I don't want to be tricked into laughing. You know what I mean? I have all kinds of reactions, I guess, to various different things. I know this got serious, but that's comedy is telling a lot of truth. That's often what I say when we go to see stand-up. I see more truth told in an hour than in a week's worth of news by the comedian who just, they know where the line is, and they're going to drag you right up to it and see if they can get you to step across with them. That's a really interesting talent, to be able to speak the unspeakable, to be able to talk about things that make people uncomfortable in a funny way, so just, I've seen a comedian say, there's no good rape jokes, and then say one, which is kind of amazing. I've seen Sarah Silverman do a Holocaust joke, and it's like, how can you? And yet, that's a safety valve. There's incredible value in humor to being able to talk about the unspeakable,
Well, the thing with Bill Cosby is one thing, because I'm like you. There's so much good Bill Cosby. I love the storytelling type of comedy more than the one-liner after one-liner.
Yes.
It's what I could listen to his stories and laugh constantly. But then you find out about the personal life, and you're right. How do you separate it? We've talked about this with musicians. There's a lot of great musicians that are horrendous people,
right. And sports people and politicians. So celebrity always has its, do they have feet of clay or not even feet of clay? Are they feet of sulfur because they're in hell?
Right. But then you get things, and this is way out getting off course, but then you get things like everyone shunning Johnny Depp because of what Amber Heard said. But then it turns out she completely lied just to ruin him and his reputation. So, but you got those feelings. So it gets hard to go back to feeling differently. It's just totally unfair. I don't know.
I definitely have that. Now that it's not only Johnny Depp, there's any number of people, like I'm trying to think, the lacrosse players, remember, that were accused, and it turns out that was specious. I believe women more than jerk guys do, because I think women have put up with a whole bunch of horrible behavior from guys for a long time. But I'm also aware that there's all kinds of bad actors out there, some female as well as male, and that you really can wreck somebody's business reputation, personal reputation, et cetera, without it being the truth. And so you kind of have to ask those unfortunate questions of, well, your story doesn't hang together. Let's go over that again. Because then, I don't want to be questioning you, and yet I kind of have to, because this is devastating if it's true. You know what I mean? So,
and like we were talking about kind of near the beginning, people just want to jump on the bandwagon and immediately condemn somebody. Well, you heard one line in a news article on Reddit, come on.
Right. Exactly. That's not doing a lot of research. That's wow. That's just the way the world is nowadays, is that, a lie can be around the world twice while the truth is getting its pants on,
Yep. So you were talking about classic comedy movies, and that's the other great thing about comedy is some people find things funny that others don't, like Dice Clay. And I think Marx Brothers and things like that are hilarious. I still like Charlie Chaplin. I don't chuckle out loud, but it's lighthearted. I enjoy it. But for me,
there's the whimsical humor instead of being a really make you laugh out loud, that it makes, and it feels you feel good, and it's about the human condition. Charlie Chaplin is exactly about that, the everyman type comedy. Yes.
And for me, and I know this isn't a hugely popular opinion, but I never got into like Airplane and things like that. I've never laughed and found them that funny. I will quote it sometimes and get a little chuckle because of the people I'm with, but if I'm getting a comedy movie, that's not usually my choice. For me, action comedy movies are way funnier. I will watch Lethal Weapon and laugh all day long over watching like Airplane or something like that.
Yeah. See, I like both of those things. And maybe Airplane is one of those things. I kind of like the overwhelm of it. You know what I mean? That they're going to just take every single joke they can find and throw it onto the screen. And so I like that. I like the wordplay and the absurd humor and that kind of stuff. I like the playing against type. Like Leslie Nielsen got an entire new career. He used to be, a Hollywood hard guy.
He was in Forbidden Planet.
Like that. Exactly. And then you see him, like I said, he got another 30 years worth of playing, Frank Drebin, right? And Police Squad and stuff like that. I really it's kind of funny. I'm at an interesting, I guess, foot in both camps. By being born in '59, I grew up with a lot of '60s TV, which was silly, but then starting to have some things of quality, and a lot of '50s and '40s movies. And the first time that you see like a Spencer Tracy, Katharine Hepburn movie where it's a little bit Battle of the Sexes and a little bit, framed by the '40s and '50s, so it's apparently the woman is going to annoy the guy into falling in love with him, which I always find absurd. But the wit, the byplay, the density of the script, and how they're not like pausing in between each thing to get a big laugh, but they just keep going. And they're so like playful with each other and occasionally, putting in little stilettos when it's necessary.
Right.
I love verbal humor when it really is. Movies became, for instance, where, wow, the kids are going to save the day and all the adults are either incompetent or evil. And I love when there's actually adults speaking adult dialogues and there's a little bit of innuendo. There's a little bit of, you know what I mean? there's a maybe back in the days of adult humor versus kid humor, it didn't mean swear words. It meant that you talked about like mature things. You know what I mean?
Right,
like, do you have a little ennui? Do you have a little bit of, I've been in love and out of love a couple times. And after a while, do you get jaded or do you just keep soldiering onwards, hoping to find love again? And, spinster humor, or I don't know, I loved that. It was a way of my growing up. You know what I mean? When I'm a kid or a teen and I'm watching adults do adult things and like, well, I don't have any of that under my belt yet. So I don't know what it's like to really be like, oh man, I thought that she was like my girl, but I see her over having dinner with that other guy. And like, you know what I mean? There was like, it gave you a kind of a fast forward. And same with Mad Magazine. I learned so much about politics and advertising and just celebrity culture and just, I don't know, the world in general before I had experienced it. You know what I mean? I didn't live in the streets of New York. I didn't been in the army. And yet I had a good feel for all of those things because Mad so well made fun of the absurdities of them.
And that's what made it funny. It was pushing it to the limit but it was a true thing. That's some of the funniest stuff in our family personally. And I mean, the show that popped in my mind when you were saying that was comedy, but really social commentary and satire is All in the Family, Archie Bunker.
Yes.
I mean, there's probably no other show that could have been completely condemned and had the people burnt alive at the stake for what they were saying. And, in this day and age, Carol O'Connor probably would have got death threats, but I did not even understand that show until I was in college. And then you had to have a certain maturity to understand it. And the absurdness of Archie Bunker's thinking, that's the funny part. And everybody knows he's like that. And it was still funny and it was mature and well done. And that sometimes takes a whole, not sometimes, that always takes a whole lot of thinking to be able to not have just social commentary and good stories, but to make it funny. That's
absolutely,
that shows the epitome of that.
Yeah. There's a through line where people have been talented enough as performers and writers that they were able to take like a loathsome human being and still portray him in a way that's at least interesting, maybe even sympathetic. So like Barney on How I Married Your Mother is a total hound dog, a total lech. And yet there's enough times when he's like, you're kind of rooting for him a little bit. And
when he shoots himself in the foot.
Exactly. And maybe there's that, there's that wonderful comeuppance of, well, that's not going to work. You think it's working and you're living in your own little dream world. Stephen Colbert, before he did his talk show, if you will, when he did the Colbert Report and played a conservative commentator, it was like birthed by when he did the, American Correspondents' Dinner, whatever that one is, where it's like, all the media personalities and the president and others are there. And he stayed in character, so perfectly lampooning George Bush by saying the kinds of things that are kind of revered in certain camps, but just saying them bluntly and without irony. You get like, well, that's not right. That's kind of madman talking. You know what I mean?
Right.
And the fact that he could do that and still be a likable character and come up with ways of looking at the news that you were telling the truth again and again and again with just enough comedy that people were not sure if he was joking or not. And tell me that's not a skill. Where
Yes.
it has to hang in the air and everybody's like, okay, I think I get it, but that's a really ugly thing, but it's really kind of funny. And the comedy of juxtaposition, of ambiguity, is a really difficult thing to do instead of just being broad and pratfally and stuff like that.
Right.
You know? So I love that.
Yeah, and without coming across as just being snarky and sarcastic.
Exactly. It's not all irony. It's not like you're always detached and you're just commenting on it because, oh, that doesn't affect you. You're just so above it all. Exactly. I think that's another one of the things. If it's done well, it's good. But a whole bunch of people went to irony and repetition, and like there's a style of comedy over the last 10 years that it's like, wow, you gotta hone your craft there. You know, when we go to our comedy festivals, we've been to Chicago and Montreal and Toronto and all kinds, Cleveland, all kinds of city comedy festivals, and you can kind of see who adopted that style or not. And it's like, look at a great like Brian Reagan, who really is funny, compared to a hack like Dane Cook, where that's so derivative, or that's so like punching down. There's like a series of sins that I could name that I think are not good comedy, and he like checked every box. Repetitive. You know what I mean? Like, I heard you the first time, and please don't comment during your show about how we're not laughing enough. You know what I mean? It's like, if you're funnier, I'll laugh, man. But if you're not, I'll be happy to give you the look.
Wow.
And you know what I mean? It's your own, everybody's their own little critic and their own little sounding board, I guess, for that kind of stuff. But that's one of those. Here's a way I got in trouble once. I went to there was a lady comic that was talking a lot about how she was just irresistible to men, and that it was causing her so many problems in her life. And it wasn't said in an absurd way. It was said in a very prideful way. And I commented on, if you're going to have that kind of humor, you kind of have to be a bombshell, instead of like, I wouldn't give you a second look. I'm not after you, and I'm a guy. And of course, my lady friends who read that particular Facebook comment, it was like, oh, lookism. Oh, you're being a bad guy by judging her on her appearance. It's like, she started it. I wouldn't have said anything about her, except that was her whole act, was how impossibly beautiful, and men are wrapped around her fingers, and it's, men are such hound dogs. And it's like, and you're the one saying all that. And then if it's not true, somebody has to inform you that that's an ill-fitting outfit or whatever else it might be. You know what I mean? So it was, I guess there's a thing about comedy where there's, you have to have incredible boldness to go up on stage with just you and a mic and be able to talk to the audience. And I when you see, like, especially rafts of all kinds of young comedians, and you can see where they're honing their craft, they're getting better at, they're working the room, and others, they just love stage time. There's some people that are so like narcissistic and look at me
that's what I was going to say.
Stand up as, instead of I'm trying to be a movie star or I'm trying to be a recording star, they're going to take stand up comedy to be the thing. It's like, man, if you're going to want more than 2 minutes of stage time, you're going to have to get better at your job.
Narcissism just doesn't go over well with comedy, not as well as in music or acting in movies.
Yeah.
So we talking about all the comedy stuff. I want to throw out a comedy writer that I've been reading of late that has become one of my favorites. And I'm not saying this in a bad way. It is not Gone with the Wind writing. Okay. People sometimes think everything has to be compared to like Gone with the Wind or, Catcher in the Rye or whatever, which honestly, I could care less about those books. I like things that
they're classics.
Yeah, right. Yes, I think I got a whole story there. I think more kids would read if we'd stop making them read the crap that we do. But so this guy, Jeff Strand, I ran into one of his books and just utterly fell in love with it. It is comedy horror. It's kind of like an adult Goosebumps is how I kind of described it.
Very good. Okay.
And I gobbled it up and loved it. Then I come to find out that growing up, not his whole life, but part of his life, he lived in Kent and he was born 2 days before I was. So I was like, oh, this is kind of kismet here, to find out all this. Mm-hmm. And actually I interviewed him for my other podcast. So he'll be coming up soon.
Exactly. Very cool. Very good.
But I highly recommend his stuff if you want something lighthearted and a little bit of horror and a little bit of comedy, and he does it very well. The one there's this one called Wolf Hunt that has two gangsters in it, and
Okay.
they're perfect. They're absolutely perfect.
Wonderful. I will
And-
definitely look him up. I mean, one of my favorite things in the world is getting a recommendation and finding out, oh, it's not just a book, it's a series. I get to go hunting. Yeah, that's just a wonderful thing to look forward to. A new immersive thing. Wonderful.
If you enjoyed the Carmack movies, the B-rated monster flicks at midnight, then you would enjoy his books. It's kind of like a novelization of a B horror movie.
Very good.
At times.
Yeah. And in reply, I'll say, have you read any AJ Martinez? I think it's AJ. He does.
Heard of them, not read.
They're really good. He does parodies of various different genres of fantasy, of science fiction, of horror, and that kind of stuff, and just really good at understanding what makes that genre so interesting to its biggest fans, and how to turn a little bit of those things on its head, to point out the absurdities, but to do it in a loving way. And I think he's got like 10 or 12 books out now, and he has never disappointed me. That and some of them have been like where Colleen and I often for the last, hour of the day read in bed. And I'm like, you got to turn to your wife and say, let me just read this passage to you because of how perfectly crafted it is. And he really, one of those guys where like, I kind of want to, when I see his books, or even on sale, especially, I kind of want to buy them and give them to a friend and say, trust me,
check it out.
I'm giving you an incredible gift because if you like this, there's more where this came from, and you're going to just, And
that's a testament because writing comedy is not easy.
It's not easy.
Delivering it on stage isn't easy, but you can play it a little bit. You can react to the audience and the way you say it, but people read in different ways. I hear the voices in my head different than you do. So writing something that's funny can be very difficult. It's very stark black and white. So to have anybody that we like that writes comedy,
right. It's kind of funny. I'm Mr. Quotes today. I know there's a quote from somebody that says like, dying is easy, comedy is hard.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's there's another guy. So AJ Martinez is kind of funny. He has books like Too Many Witches and something like the versus the pulsating brain. I'm trying to think, doctor something.
Okay, I'm going to check
from
them out.
The titles, you can tell what thing he's lampooning, if you will. So you'll see the section and you'll browse down the titles and you'll go, man, there's like half a dozen here I want to read because I like those, the fantasy one and the science fiction one and that kind of stuff. His latest one that I read was Constance Verity Saves the World. It's a little bit of a takeoff maybe on the Spy Kids movies that Robert Rodriguez has been doing. And they're really good because the hero is well aware of, man, things go my way all the time. I get the best coincidences that let me get out of the death trap and find the clue and that kind of stuff. And it plays with that, the absurdity of, someone's going to save the world. How do they do that? Is there like a luck lure that gave them their abilities? And it's Constance Verity, of course, being the perfect name for the Buffy, the Vampire Slayer type character, if you will. I really love Christopher Moore in the same way. He does maybe not fantasy and science fiction, but he does a fantasy take on real world situations. And so he's got vampire book called You Suck or something like that. You know what I mean? And the, let's see, Island of the Sequined Love Nuns, where it's like, I have to read it just from the title. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Yes.
I know. And a little bit of like, kind of like Why the Caged Bird Sings, but I think it was the, Forlorn Wail of Love Hollow, or I'm sorry I'm butchering it because his title is so much better than the butchery that I'm making of it. And he not only has those great premises, but takes it just to that right point of absurdity. He doesn't have one series, but they do interconnect. And so you get characters reappearing and sometimes in ways that you didn't expect it. So that's a very cool thing, a little personal Easter egg. And he has phrases that I have adopted because they're just so handy. So like whenever something goes bad in a Shakespearean way, you have to say, that's heinous fuckery most foul.
That should be on a t-shirt.
Something you're going to drop in church, and yet with the right crowd, that's just...
Well, I've said things like that in church. That's a whole other story.
Exactly.
Well, before we go, because I got to unfortunately jump off, we need to mention some kings of comedy and in the music realm, Dr. Demento and Weird Al. I mean,
Exactly.
there's like that. They have the whole, and Dr. Demento didn't create the comedy, but there's all you need to know is Dr. Demento and Weird Al, and you've got
Right.
comedy.
If you've been listening to the Dr. Demento show for pretty much all your life, as I have, you've got 40 years of comedy music under your belt. You know what I mean? All the way back to, I don't even know, what's the puppy, dead puppies, and he all the different. That was one of the first outlets for parody. I think I've mentioned this to you before. There's a very cool festival in Chicago called FUMP, the Funny Music Project, that Colleen and I have been to. I don't know, 3 of the last 5 years. I think we were going to go this year, and then COVID got us. If you're looking for where you're seeing the people that were still great practitioners of that, and in a very loving, appreciative audience, and of course they collect it all on CD, so you're getting 2 CDs worth of the best music for that year, song parodies, and I just love, and people are very musical. You know what I mean? The fact that it doesn't just come out as doing stand up, but that they can find a way to put it to a reasonable thing, and once in a while a song like that breaks through on the radio. You know what I mean? So it's like I keep hoping that one of these guys will have that lightning in a bottle experience,
Right.
and it's like kind of a MacArthur Genius Grant, right? If you make a whole bunch of money, then you can continue to do this thing without pressure, without fail, without having to do your day job, taking time away from it. I really believe in that patron type thing. I think a lot of them have Kickstarter projects and whatever, Backer City, and there's various other crowdfunding sites, and that's one of those. As I've gotten money, I often sponsor things that I have a fleeting acquaintance with their work, and yet I want that work to come into this world. I want this guy to have the chance to do this stuff,
comedy music, because like you said, there's tons out there, some of it better than others, like anything else. But Weird Al is really the only one that's been successful. And I don't want to take anything from him. He's my idol. I grew up singing my football games, Friday night football games in high school, in the marching band. My friend and I would sing Weird Al to the whole bus there and back, and people would request certain Weird Al songs. So,
right.
I mean, that's like my
cool.
geek moment highlight of high school, because at no other time could we be so geeky as we were singing Weird Al to everybody on the bus.
But so appreciated for it too, which is
exactly.
Cool,
that was the whole thing. It was like,
exactly.
Wow, even being out of tune and everything. But there are a lot of comedy musicians out there, but nobody's been as successful. What made Weird Al that moment? I don't know.
Exactly.
And why don't they hit it now?
Yeah, from having been to Alfest, and then that's this nexus of comedy, and now the Fump Fest has kind of taken over for that. I really love Throwing Toasters, and Grant, what's his last name? Doesn't matter. The band is Throwing Toasters. I really like Rob Paravadian. I think it's Vanian instead of Vonian, and he does a great thing about the boy, I don't know why I'm one step behind in my references today. The
cold weather.
I guess it's that. He does a great thing where he was a cello player growing up, which of course is comedy gold. You know what I mean? For how many times? But about Pachelbel's Canon, and how he hates that song because he had to play it and it had a very boring cello part, but then it's in every other song. And he goes through this medley of all these other songs that have that, the particular melody, and that it's like following him, haunting him. So if you look for that on YouTube, Rob Paravodian and Pachelbel's Canon, you'll see that great performance of, and I think every time he does it, the list grows because he keeps on discovering another artist that stole it.
Have you heard of Axis of Allies? Is it Axis of Allies? And Axis of Allies? Yeah, Axis of Allies. It's this comedy group, but they point out how rock songs all use the same chords. And they do a medley of like 50 songs, and it's just the same thing on the keyboard over and over. And they keep singing more and more songs over top of it.
That's
and
very funny.
They do comedy, and it's kind of the same thing. Have you heard of Thomas Mabe, M-A-B-E?
No, have not.
He's another one. He does some comedy, but he also does some songs. He has this really good one called Wiper Blades, and about driving through slushy weather with bad wiper blades.
Exactly.
And it's got some really good stuff. And he also is the one that did the Revenge of the Telemarketers, that he was unemployed. So when telemarketers would call, he'd create a character and he'd talk to them as that character, like, oh man, you got a vacuum cleaner, you need to come over. And basically it came out that he had blood on the curtains. He needed to get the blood off. And did the guy know anywhere to hide a knife with blood on it? And I mean, it's just totally freaking this poor little sales kid out, but he had all these characters he did. So Tom Maybe is another good one.
Yeah, that's Carla Ulbrich. I really like. In fact, this is a very funny story. On Facebook they had a thing. Hey, we'll send you the CD free. All you do is pay for postage. So it's like I saw her at Fump. I like her enough. Went to her website, and then they had, well, as long as you're buying this CD, and if you buy this other one for $5, and I think I ended up buying her entire catalog for a very reasonable price per CD, because the add-ons were always like witty and engaging and like, why not? And so not only is she funny, but she's a smart business lady. If she put together that campaign, like I went there to just like buy one apple and I went home with a bushel.
She knows her audience.
Yes, exactly. And like, I don't know, why wouldn't I want to have those things? Like for $5 a pop, that there's got to be a couple gems on each one, and in her case, they're high density. There's lots of good stuff, and I want to support those folks.
Yeah.
I want it to be that they keep making more, and that this isn't like, there's all kinds of comedians where it's like, they take their clown makeup off and they're sad underneath, and I want it to be that no, comedy could really be a worthwhile thing to do with your life, instead of being, I gotta struggle to bring this gift to the world. I don't want people to struggle in that way if they're producing something of quality.
And there's a reason that they say laughter's the best medicine.
Exactly that. That's the biggest thing that Colleen and I miss from the COVID lockdown is stand-up comedy. We haven't been to Hilarities or Funny Stop or JR's Last Laugh in so long. We haven't been to our comedy festivals. Man, it really is. There's nothing better for your cardiovascular health, for your mental health, than go and just laugh your butt off for an hour.
When
so wonderful.
Colin was in high school, he had a bunch of friends over and they had a stand-up comedy open mic night here at the house, all the friends. So cool. And there was some funny stuff, man. This one kid told a story and we were all rolling on the ground. It was just, he delivered it perfectly. And we're like, dude, you really should go to like open mic night. He's like, I was just telling a story. And it was perfectly timed and well done.
Well crafted, exactly.
Yeah, well done.
I can kind of understand that because I'm a pretty funny guy. At least my friends tell me that often. But when they say, like, you should go do stand-up, it's like, I don't want to be in the middle of a room of people saying, make me laugh. I love doing it for my friends. I love doing it while we're like playing a game and you can sneak a good joke in and relieve tension. And just, it's like a gift that I give to my friends instead of whatever that next level is of now I have to be funny on command.
Absolutely.
And another thing is, I really don't like repetition. I tend to do a whole bunch of improv. Like when I speak, I have an outline, but every one of my speeches is different. Every one of my presentations, and memorizing lines so that I'll say them perfectly from city to city. I got my tight 10 and my tight 20 and my tight hour. That's hell to me, is to craft it so that you know when to pause, to wait for the laugh. And I just don't want to repeat myself. I'm always looking for, I don't know, a new thing. I'm much more improv than I am stand up, I guess. So that's me.
There's something good to be said with that too. In bringing joy to people's lives in general.
Exactly. Especially, it's wonderful when you make a joke in real time, spontaneously great. Like when Colleen and I crack each other up, that's another thing that, now that we know we're each funny, is there anything better than just that we're driving along and every billboard is an opportunity for a pun, a snarky comment, a reminisce, whatever. We're little joke factories. She's really funny. I am blessed to have a funny wife. So
that's great.
She kind of thinks I'm good too. So that's a good, back and forth. So,
right. All right. Well, hey man, I hate to cut it short. I got to go, unfortunately.
Okay. Always a pleasure. And we'll talk again next week.
Talk to you later, man.
Bye-bye.
You have been listening to the Relentless Geekery Podcast. Come back next week and join Alan and Steven's conversation on geek topics of the week.